Hey, welcome back, Faithful Politics listeners and watchers. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, we are so happy to have you. And if you're listening to us just on our audio, we're happy to have you as well. So I always feel like I'm always catering to like the YouTube crowd, but the audio listeners are where it's at.
We appreciate you are much more consistent than our YouTubers. So we love you YouTubers, but thank you audio people. And I'm Josh Bertram, of course, your faithful co-host.
Yeah.
Sorry, Will, I stole your thunder there, dude.
It's fine. There wasn't any thunder to steal. And I'm Will, your political host. And this week we have joining with us Ryan Burge, who is a professor of practice at the John C. Danforth Center on Religion and Politics at Washington University in St. Louis. Before that, he was an associate professor of political science at Eastern Illinois University and is a pastor. Are you still pastoring now, Ryan?
I was a pastor.
He was a pastor for, was it 17
In
and
a
a half?
previous life.
Yeah, until July of 2024, my church closed down, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh, man.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Well, I guess the consolation prize is you're here joining us today. So welcome to Faithful Politics.
It's about the same, guys, except I don't have to get up on Sunday mornings and preach, which is fun.
I hear you. I hear you. Well, Ryan, I was telling you before we started recording, you're somebody that I've actually wanted to talk to you for a while because I subscribe to your Substack, which is a great Substack, and have been following your work for a couple of years now. And you just came out with a new book called The Vanishing Church, which is how the hollowing out of moderate congregations is hurting democracy, faith, and us. And yeah, and I'm just curious. Here's the book here for those that can see it.
Ooh, I don't even have a copy of the book yet. You guys have
Check
copies.
it out, dude. Look at that, dude. Look at
What is that?
What
You got to
in the
know
world?
people. You got to know people in this business.
Is it backwards on your end? By the
No,
way?
it's right. It's right way on my end. Yeah.
Oh, good. Why? What is up in me?
I don't know.
Am I having an aneurysm? Sorry.
You probably
anyway.
are. Anyways, but yeah, so the Vanishing Church. So start us off by I guess not just talking about the church, but why did you get into this world of writing about like church politics, what the church thinks about all kinds
crazy
of
church people?
Yeah, like what path did you take in life that led you down that road?
Oh, a terrible, terrible path filled with pain and despair. I always tell people when I was in gifted class when I was in high school, which is like the kiss of death, honestly, for lots of kids. And my instructor was like, "What do you want to do when you're a grown up?" And I said I wanted to be a youth pastor and a lawyer. And she said, "You can't do both those things." I said, "Just watch me." And
Says
so I guess
who?
Yeah, says who. And so I guess I'm like a quarter off for each of those, right? I ended up being a pastor and a political science professor. So
nice.
I mean, it all kind of. I just think that like you should follow what you're interested in, and then find a way to get paid to do what you love to do, and that's sort of like what the academic credo is like how people pay you to research stuff. But I guess in the way that I'm different though is that I research stuff that actually lots of people seem to care about, which is not always the case with academics. A lot of times, like I'll read academic, I'm like, you dedicated 3 years to your life to writing a book about what now? Like, so like I always
basket weaving.
Yeah, sometimes it's like I just reviewed a whole bunch of like grant applications yesterday for this granting organization, and like I'm reading some of these titles, I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about, and I work in religion and politics. Like, how far down the rabbit hole can you be where I don't even know what you're talking about, let alone the general public? So, I always wanted to just write and talk and think about this area because, listen, it impacts all of us. Whether you're done with religion or not, it's not done with you. Whether you're done with politics or not, it's not done with you. It's going to impact your life in small ways and big ways. And everyone has an opinion. That's what I love I tell people, like, I don't have to walk in a room and like try to convince you that what I'm doing is interesting. Like,
right.
If I was a professor, like, oh, I'm a professor. What do you teach? Botany. You're going to be like, okay, let's talk about like, the baseball.
What's
or
botany?
Yeah, exactly. What is that? For me, it's like I'm already on third base. As soon as I tell people what I study, and it's like, that's awesome. Whenever you go to a conference and your room's already full, whenever you write a book and people buy it, like that's a cool thing. And so I just want to help people understand the world of religion and politics because you're basically going on a journey with me to try to understand this world. And then you get to sort of like jump in the sidecar and go along this journey with me.
I love that. So with your book, The Vanishing Church, Like say you're sitting in a church lobby or you're sitting next to someone like, on public transit or something like that, in an airplane, and, you got a few minutes. How would you describe the thesis of your book in about, 60 seconds or whatever? You can take longer than that, but like, how would you describe the basic thesis of this book and why you wrote it?
First things first, I don't talk to anyone on airplanes ever. I mean, let's just get
so
that out of the way.
So that's not going to happen.
No, never. Because they're going to ask you what I do, and it's going to turn into a whole thing. I'll be trapped next to a person who has really intense opinions about religion and politics for 3 hours, and I don't want to hear about it, honestly.
I hear that.
So the thesis
like,
of the book
I already
is
do my research.
exactly. I don't need you to tell me how to do my job. Okay, I don't go in you're a plumber. I don't tell you, hey, that P trap's in the wrong location. That's a problem by academics, by the way. Everyone thinks they're an expert in our field.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm an expert in anything except what I'm an expert in. I don't look at electrical or plumbing or construction and act like I know what I'm talking about. Anyway, that's my grump. Because everyone thinks they come up with a new idea for studying this stuff, and I'm the idiot for doing it the way I'm doing it. And I'm like, I've thought about this pretty much every waking moment of my life for the last 20 years, and you thought about it for about 13 seconds, and now you're smarter than me. Congratulations. Anyway, back to the book. The book is, there's been a lot of books written about polarization in America, like Ezra Klein wrote Why We're Polarized, and there's Liliana Mason's Uncivil Agreement. There's all these books about polarization, where it comes from, what it means, but there's never really been a book written about how American religion has made that worse. And I think that's the book that needed to be written. And honestly, I'm a big believer the books I should write at this point in my life are ones that no one else can write. And I think being this perched between these two worlds of knowing all this data that I know, but also, growing up in the church and being a pastor of a church that declined, being one of these mainline churches that they're struggling so much. I just don't think there's anyone else where the Venn diagram, the circles overlap. I'm in that circle. And so I kind of had to write the book.
So you talk about the vanishing church, obviously in your book. So the word vanishing, I think comes up a lot in the data and a lot of the stuff that you've done. Can you just go in a little bit of detail of set the stage for us, paint the picture, what about the church is vanishing, and then we can kind of look at some of the more details in your book.
Yeah, so I think the vanishing is on a couple levels. One is the vanishing of the main line. I don't know how your audience, the main line is Episcopalians, United Methodists, Presbyterians, Lutherans, kind of the not evangelical flavor of American Protestant Christianity used to be the dominant flavor of American Protestant Christianity. In the 1950s, half of all Americans were mainline Protestants. And even in 1975, it was 30%. And today it's 8%. It used to be the glue that really held society together in a whole bunch of ways. And Episcopalians and pastors held a tremendous sway, not just in their communities, but in the national political system too. And now they've been marginalized, reduced, vanished. I mean, in many communities, there's literally no mainline Protestants to be found. In my county of 40,000 people, I think there's a total of 4 mainline churches left, and only one of them has over 50 members. So, in my community, in 20 years, there'll be one mainline church in a community of 40,000 people. So that's what I mean by vanishing. But also what I mean by vanishing is even evangelical congregations and Catholic congregations where the left and the right made up equal measure, where liberals and conservatives sat side by side. Those kind of churches are vanishing rapidly now because evangelicalism has become incredibly conservative. We all know that story. But also the Catholic Church. That actually might be the biggest takeaway from this book is the white Catholic Church especially is becoming incredibly Republican. Now it's 65-35 on election day for Trump. And among Catholic priests, it's even more dramatic. Young Catholic priests are incredibly conservative in a way the Catholic Church was not 30 or 40 years ago. So vanishing in the sense of most of American white Protestant Christianity in America is now overwhelmingly conservative in a way that it just was not 30 years ago.
Man, that is absolutely fascinating to me. And I just wonder why. What's going on? Why is it that they're vanishing? Do you have any thoughts on that? I'm sure you do. What's going on with the vanishing in the mainline Protestant movement? What happened there that explains this for our audience?
So here's the best explanation. This comes from a guy named J.B. Demerath. I wrote this article in 1995, and then no one read it until just recently, trying to figure out why the main lines disappeared. He makes this interesting argument that basically the main line disappeared because it won. Like it became like a lot of mainline ideas like pluralism and individualism and freedom and free speech were all mainline ideals that were not mainstream in America until about 100 years ago. And then they became mainstream. And then everyone's like, well, why do we need to go to church then if we've already adopted all your ideas? Like, what's the differentiator between you and the median culture? And the answer with the main line was not a whole lot. And so, someone told me one time, if I'm going to go to a country club with Jesus, why not just go to a country club? And I think in many ways, that's what the main line did. Was evangelicals have always been successful because they've separated themselves from the culture. That us versus them ideas, like where we have these clear ideas about marriage and gender and sexuality and all those things, that created a clear delineation. And the main line didn't do that. The main line actually is pretty much in the middle of everything, politically speaking, theologically speaking. And a lot of people just said, why do I need to go to that? I don't really believe it anyway. So why should I be there? And the sad reality is that one of the reasons the main line still exists in large numbers is because they have tons of institutional money. They go back sometimes hundreds of years. That's what's keeping them alive, because membership wise, they don't have a whole lot of time left. And meanwhile, evangelicalism is actually doing quite well. They're actually large. There's actually a larger share of Americans are evangelical today than in 1972. So, you can kind of see the tale of two cities there.
Is that shrinkage like centralized or focused along any particular dynamic, like whether it's conservative, progressive, black, white, like in any of those particular denominations that you mentioned?
Yeah, so I think in some ways it's both and. I think people left to go to the left and the right because the main line's always suffered this problem, and I talk about it in the book. Margaret Thatcher once said, if you stand in the middle of the road, you get hit by cars coming and going. And that really is what it feels like the main line, what happened to them is they were, I was a mainline pastor for 20 years, right? I grew up Southern Baptist, became American Baptist. And I'll tell you this, my personal life, I saw this all the time. I would tell people what I am, and my Southern Baptist friends would say I'm too liberal. And then I would talk to my atheist friends, and they say I'm too conservative. It's because you didn't pick the edge of the spectrum on either side. Therefore, you're too much and not enough. And the main line lost. You actually look at the data. The main line lost to evangelicalism and to the nuns at the same time, because I think people felt like I can't be a liberal Christian because that's incompatible, which is not true, but that's what they believe. So they became non-religious, or I want to take a more conservative stance on these social issues, these political issues of the day, and the main line doesn't want to do that. So I'm going to become a Southern Baptist or an Assemblies of God or a non-denominational. So I think in some ways, like their tragic flaw is by trying to be everything to everyone, they ended up being nothing to no one.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier something about a 50-year, maybe it was a 100-year time span. Was there a particular decade kind of in this shift that really kind of stood out to you as far as, contributing more to the decline in church attendance?
So there's a really interesting period for the main line specifically between like 1978 and 1990, where they went from 30% of America to 20% of America in like a 10-year window, which I don't talk about this in the book, but it's something I think about all the time. It's like, what in God's name happened for a denomination to lose a third of its members in a decade? Because that's not death. Yeah. You don't lose a third of your members through death in a decade. The math don't math like that math. So it's not that. But I do think the more important decade is the 1990s, especially the early between 1991 and 1998. The share of young adults who identify as Christians dropped by 12 points, and the share who are non-religious rose by 12 points during that same time period. And to me, like what we're living in today is really the remnants of that, great divorce that happened in the early 1990s, because those kids are now like having kids and grandkids. And guess what? You raise your kids the way that you were raised. And if you left religion, you're going to raise your kids without religion too. And so if you look at the data, the share of Americans who are non-religious did not budge between 1972 and 1991. And then from 1991 onward is when all the movement happened. So really, I think that's for the mainline, it was the 80s, and for all of Christianity, it was the early 1990s, especially 1991 and 1998.
So when you say shifted 12 points, like can you put that a little bit in context? Like is that a lot, or is that?
I mean, for those of you people who don't study religious demography, they don't like have a sense of like what massive change is. Like massive change is like 5 points in 2 years. Like, you know, the way I describe this kind of movement is glacial. You know, like if you go down 5 points in 10 years, that's a significant change that we need to really be paying attention to. And so for a group to go down 12 points in 8 years is just insanity. Like stasis is the norm when it comes to, or if it's change, it's like a 5 point shift in 10 years. Like these kind of changes don't happen that quickly. So whenever you see something like that, your ears have to perk up and go, okay, something happened here. This is an inflection point. That it's not these gradual slopes. It's like the line changes direction really quickly. And so, yeah, from a demographic standpoint, that is a humongous change in a very short period of time.
So if I'm just making sure that I'm following the argument correctly, and just like to say it out loud for our audience that hasn't looked at the book and hasn't read it. So the idea is that, number one, religious change is normally slow. My guess is that's because of the staying power of religion in people's lives. It's like a worldview kind of thing. And there's a slowness to it. Now, over the last few years, what we had happen is actually we've seen in the Protestant mainline denominations, which was essentially the major representation of American Christianity, with 50%, you said, I guess in the 50s or something like that, or in the middle of the century, and now being 8% today. So massive loss.
Yes.
Massive changes in thinking. And then, of course, the rise of these nuns, NONES, in 1991. And the idea being that they're leaving Christianity and they're going into nothing. They're just kind of like, I don't know, describe that for us so our audience can get their mind around what the nuns are and the movement that we're seeing here.
I think the backdrop that's important here is that when the nuns started rising, they did not rise equally across every segment of the population. They rose significantly among people who were left of center politically, and they rose at a much slower rate for people who are right of center politically. This is a key point. We call this the God gap. It's the idea that it used to be that Democratic Party, Republican Party were still overwhelmingly Christian. 90% of voters on both sides were Christians. And today, that's not the case. For instance, among Harris voters in 2024, 45% were non-religious. Among Trump voters, it was 12%. So what essentially happened in the 1990s was the parties began to sort themselves out on religion, where the Republican Party positioned itself as the party of sort of traditional values and, against same-sex marriage and all those things. And the Democratic Party positioned itself as something else, maybe more permissive of other lifestyles. Not in favor of same-sex marriage in the 90s yet, but they were going to be there 15 years later. And so what happened was people go, okay, I'm a liberal person, and Christianity is a conservative religion, so I'm going to leave Christianity because I want to align my worldview behind my partisanship. And this is a really key point.
But this isn't true, though, about the liberals, right? That meaning they couldn't be Christian as liberal. You had said that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think today, the share of very liberal people who are non-religious is now 62% of very liberals are non-religious. Among young people, it's 70%. So they think it's incongruent to be a very liberal person and a person of faith, because in America, for reasons that I don't think we can ever fully understand, religion is seen as conservative. And by the way, that's not just Christianity. That's Judaism, that's Islam, that's Latter-day Saint. It's religion in the United States is seen as a move toward the right, a move towards conservatism. And these young liberals want to sort themselves out. They don't want to be the weirdo standing out who's like a socialist, but also is a Methodist or, a Catholic or whatever else. And guess which, and unfortunately in our society, you know which one's easier to change? Your religion. Your politics is basically locked in, and your religion's much more malleable. So your religion then will match your partisanship more than the reverse of those things.
That is so wild. I have to ask you. So this isn't necessarily a book question, but as a former pastor,
yeah,
like how much of your data did you bring into your sermon writing? Because I was talking to Josh before you came on, and I'm just like, man, if I had the skill set that Ryan did, I swear I would just like knock these sermons out of the park, because I would know like what they're probably thinking. So I got to ask, as a pastor and person that
that's a great question, Will. No one's ever asked me that before.
Well, that's why you come to Faithful Politics for
that's
the question, the hard pressing question.
Come on, somebody.
No one else will
ask. No, the answer is sometimes I'd actually preach a sermon where a lot of it was about social science. Honestly, like there's a famous like psychological experiment called the marshmallow test. And it's about like, can kids delay gratitude or like delay satisfaction, right? Like they'll put a marshmallow on a plate with like a 3-year-old and say, if you don't eat it in 5 minutes, I'll come back and give you 2 marshmallows if you eat them both. And then like how predicted that is, like how the Christian life is really about delaying gratitude for some greater good down the road. So like a lot of what I would do would be like trying to tie things back into like what social science knows, but also like I was a history major in undergrad. So a lot of my stories were historical, like let's talk about the history, the culture of first century Palestine, right? What Jesus was dealing with the Roman authorities and what power structure looked like and all those things. And this is going to date me so bad, but I'll just say it. What really like the most formative preacher I ever heard was Rob Bell, like early Rob Bell, like 2004, 2005 Rob Bell, because he preached like no one else I'd ever heard in my entire life, because he came at it from a different angle. And I always thought, well, I've got this extra skill set. Like, I'm not a theologian. I can't preach a theological sermon about transubstantiation or limited atonement or whatever it is, but I can tell you about like the social world and how that impacted the time of Jesus and how it can impact our lives too. So why not bring that in? And so I think that was always sort of I was a teacher. A lot of my congregation would tell me, Ryan, we really appreciate it because you're a teacher and a preacher at the same time. You're giving us head and heart during your sermon in a way that we haven't gotten before. So I thought that was always sort of my secret weapon. I was like, I always like look back in the literature and talk for 10 minutes about something that might be relevant to what the passage was about. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's really cool to bring that kind of stuff in. I think it's super important to start bringing some of the social science in, especially if you're hitting questions that where the social science will, it'll make a difference in your interpretation, or the advancement of science will make a difference. And that's always the tension that everyone that's trying to take the Bible seriously and take our culture seriously, is that you're holding two things in tension. You're holding, on the one hand, you have this very ancient book that is really, it's almost deceptive in the sense that people look at it, it's written in English and they feel like, oh, I can read it and just clearly understand it from the beginning, which I'm not saying it's completely not, you can understand it. There are certainly parts in the big picture that you can understand, but there's so many things in the Bible that are difficult. And the tension of how do we hold the biblical truth and then our scientific advancement, and what do we do when, for instance, the book of Scripture, to talk about like Augustine, which was one of the major theologians of the early church, the book of Scripture, he talked about the book of Scripture and the book of creation, and what happens when the book of Scripture and the book of creation seem like they are contradicting each other, and you either have basically gotten one of those interpretations wrong. You're fallible in both, as a theological interpreter and as an interpreter of culture and the world. And so when there's a contradiction, again, making the assumption that God is perfect and isn't going to be contradictory, right? There's a lot of assumptions that come in, but making that assumption, then at that point, you can say, well, I'm going to have to change one of these views. Like, I'm getting something wrong somewhere. Something is off, because if God is the author of truth, than if we're discerning truth both out in creation and through the scriptures, which essentially they're kind of part of the same thing, right? But when we're discerning truth, like, we're not going to get contradictory truth. And I think that's so fascinating in our culture, because we live in these weird places where, like, we don't believe in truth, and yet we do at the same time. We don't usually apply our sense of skepticism, maybe, about the Bible that a lot of people might have had, to let's say, like, the doctor. Although there is growing in that there's people that are very skeptical, but we many times we don't we're not consistent, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, with our skepticism across all the different areas of life. And I was thinking about that when you were talking. And one thing that I think is really interesting about your among many things about your research, is this idea of, like, again, the atheists and agnostics. There's this idea of deconversion that we were always, like, scared, like, that was put into our minds. Like, once someone gets to 18, or like in their college years, they deconvert, they become an atheist, they become an agnostic, they become whatever it is. Versus, though, the nuns, the people that are just disconnected but not atheists, and that's one of the things you use. What's significant about that? Why does that matter to keep those distinctions clear?
Oh, I think it's, you're a lot of Christians, like, when I say nuns, they immediately think of atheists, and that's just not. That's not. You're thinking of the most extreme version of nuns. Atheists are 6% of America. About 20% of the nuns are atheists. It's only 20%. So 20% are atheists, 20% are agnostic, and 60% are nothing in particular. Like, I can't drive this point home enough that most nuns are not atheists or agnostics, or nothing in particular. And nothing in particular people are just a totally different classification of person. Like, the only thing those two groups share in common is they don't believe in God. They're not part of organized religion, but beyond that, like, they share nothing in common. Atheist agnostics have much higher levels of education, much higher levels of income. In fact, an atheist is twice as likely to have a 4-year college degree compared to a nothing in particular. Atheists are the most politically active religious group in America today, and nothing in particulars are the least active politically, group in America today. Like, they're just in. Atheists have a much stronger dislike of religion than nothing in particulars. For instance, we did a survey for the Templeton Foundation, and we asked people, a series of non-religious people, we asked them a series of statements about religion, like, religion is a form of child abuse, religion should be eradicated, religion has no place in the modern world. And among atheists, about 45% of people agreed with those statements, and only 15% of nothing in particulars agree with those statements. So it's like they're not even in the same. Their orientation towards religion is not even the same, and yet we throw them all together in this big category called nuns, and it's sort of it's nonsense, to be honest with you. And I think it's actually counterproductive, because, like, now I have to figure out how to argue with an atheist about the existence of God. It's like, no, you probably shouldn't do that, because there's not many people who are even in that category to begin with. So I think it's always helpful. Like, it's like, if you had a company you're doing market, you would do no market research before you try to reach out to consumers. Like, that's what I feel like a lot of what Christianity is doing right now, is just sort of flailing and getting. And I think in some ways atheists become like this trope that evangelical pastors can yell about, when in reality that's not at all what they are. They just become like a figurehead for secularism in America, which is, it's just not true.
It kind of reminds me of the idea that the opposite of love is indifference.
Exactly
this
right.
idea
Yes.
that, like, they're not really, like, atheists, like, they might even have like a hatred, and like a driving force, like, towards religion. And that almost is like, hey, they're passionate. There's something there. They care about, things deeply. And the people that are writing, and just to make sure I'm clear, though, it's people like the nuns. They're, again, so finishing that last thought, they don't care. They're indifferent to religion, or like, at least enough to write on a survey. They're indifferent to religion. And I guess that's kind of getting to my question, even driving a little bit deeper, is how do we define and categorize the nuns, like, or none in particular religion? Like, are there parts in their other answering, right, of survey questions that reveal things about their characteristic? Like, is this truly a group that shares enough characteristics to be called a legitimate subgroup sociologically, or is it just people, they might kind of be Christian, they might believe in God, but they're just not going to answer that on a survey, or they're not going to say that they care about it that much? Does that question make sense?
No, it makes total sense.
Okay.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I think the problem, like sociologically, is that nothing in particulars don't make any sense. Like they're not a cohesive subgroup because they're basically defined by what they're not by what they are.
Right.
You know, like Protestants are a cohesive subgroup, Catholics are a cohesive, Jews, you know, Latter-day Saints,
Right.
and even atheist agnostics are somewhat cohesive. You know, they do have a lot in common. The nothing in particular is sort of catch-all for none of the above, which means you get all kinds of people in there. You get people who are, you know, very anti-religion, very
Yes.
pro-religion, you know, all different races and all those things. So I think I always tell people, like, there's an American Atheist Association, and there's obviously a bunch of, you know, Christian organizations. There's no association for the nothing in particulars. Like they don't join things. They're not a group like that. And so in some ways, it's like you're trying to describe a group that doesn't want to be described. That's almost like so amorphous they don't fit in any category. But you do sort of see some commonalities in them, like I said, about their relationship toward religion, which is generally not as cold as atheists, but not as warm as, you know, Protestants or Catholics, obviously. In many ways, I think they're like sort of the dropouts of American society. You know, their education is very low. Their relationship to religion is very low. Their political engagement is very low. Only a third of them vote on election day when it's half of atheists. So yeah, they're in some ways they're an amorphous group, but they do share some commonalities, you know, on these different metrics.
You know, your book talks about like religion becoming somewhat of a tribal identity, and you mentioned earlier too, which I was surprised. Like, it's a lot easier for people to leave a church or leave a denomination than it is for them to leave their political identity or their political party. So, like, what has like your research shown, like, as far as like how do people identify? Like, do people tend to like? So I consider myself a liberal. I'm also a Christian. I like to think I normally put Christian before I identify as liberal, but even just now, I just identified myself as liberal first. So, like, I'm curious on like what has your research shown on, you know, on just how people are identifying within the church.
Yeah, so I think this is the trickiest methodological thing to get to, but I think that the data is starting to mount in saying that we used to just assume that religion was a worldview, right? And then everything sort of lived downstream of your religious worldview. So, you know, who would you vote for on election day? Well, you know, what would Jesus do? Who would Jesus vote for? What's the Christian worldview on this question? Or like, you know, something happens in your life, like how would a Christian respond? I think the reality is that that might have never been true. We just wanted it to be true. And I think the reality is that a lot more people are identifying politically first and then religiously second. Like, I'm a conservative Christian. You know, hardly ever people say I'm a Christian who's a conservative. You hear a lot of people say I'm a conservative Christian. So you're automatically denoting your ideology first in that, you know, that setup there. And I think that's the part that might be the most disheartening thing about American society. Is we were always, you know, especially you grew up in a Christian house where we talked about Christian worldview, is that very few Christians actually have a Christian worldview. They have a Republican worldview that they lay on top of Christianity, or a liberal worldview they lay on top of Christianity. And by the way, people read the Constitution in the same way they read the Bible, which is they emphasize the parts they like and they explain away the parts they don't like. You know, I mean, that's just how we're wired, unfortunately. People
That'll
like,
preach.
well, yeah. Like the plain reading of the scripture says, okay, so I'm going to stop you right there. There is no plain reading of the scripture. It's you're bringing all your biases to the party when you do that. You know, whether it be your age, your race, your gender, your country of origin, your political ideology, right? There's no way to read the Bible objectively. That's impossible because we're filtering everything through this worldview of ideology in America, unfortunately. And I think that's where we get in trouble. As we try to say, like, well, there's only one way to interpret this passage. I'm like, well, the Jewish people would have something else to say about that, because there's no one way to interpret any passage in the Torah. There's multiple ways. So I think that's where we get in trouble, is to say, like, this is what you see a lot on Twitter right now. You can't be a Christian and vote for the Democrats. Like, really? Like, because the black church is 90% Democratic voters.
I know a lot of Christians that voted Democrat, especially in this last election. Yeah, but there are people who
legitimately will tell you. They will go to the mat
on
this point.
I know.
And it's like, you're telling me now that one party's evil and one party's good. So basically half the country's evil. That's what you're saying. Like, by extension, you're saying half the country is evil. Okay, that's not a great starting place for democratic discussion. Little d democratic discussion. But unfortunately, that's where we are. Politics has become the master identity, and everything lives downstream of politics, including whether you go to church, what church you go to, how often you go to church, is really more of a reflection of what your politics are than what you actually believe about Jesus and the Bible and truth and all those other things.
Yeah, what's weird, and the reason the identity issue is resonates with me, especially is because, number one, been reading a lot of Jonathan Haidt. As any listener of our show knows, I'm a bit of a Jonathan Haidt fanboy. But like when people merge like their political identity with their religious identity, I feel like the things that they are allowed to believe or think or opinions to have are shaped by one of those identities. So, for instance, like if I am a Republican, there are like a list of core moral pillars that I have to comply with, or else I'm going to be kicked out, right? But one of those core pillars isn't to hate LGBTQ, right? Because there's a log cabin Republicans, like there's an active LGBTQ component of the Republican Party. Not very popular, but there is. But if you become a Christian, so if you identify more strongly with a Christian, like that is one of the pillars that's built into some sects. Like, okay, you have to have very strong views against LGBTQ people because you're a Christian, So I'm curious if you've ever really looked at any sort of data that shows like what happens when those two identities like clash with one another, like who wins generally.
So I think for most people, sensibility tends to win. And actually, there's a chapter in the book called "Are We as Polarized as We Think We Are?" And the way that it's perceived is like, oh man, the far left and the far right, everyone's like sorted into these camps, like at the fringes of the political spectrum. But if you actually look at a lot of data, what you realize that most people are really amazingly good at finding the center of a conversation and living close to the center. Like for instance, the one grump I always get on social media is when I say oh, the share of people identify as liberal today is up 10 points from the share of people identified as liberal 50 years ago. And they go, how can that be true when the word liberal means something totally different today than it meant 50 years ago? Here's what's really funny. If you look at the median score on that question for the last 52 years, it's always within 5% of the center. So no matter what happens to the word conservative or liberal, we still magically find our way to the middle of the spectrum. And I think the wisdom of crowds speaks to this, right? We always have found our way to the middle. And I think on these debates about, in the book, I talk about this great study that Tricia Bruce did at the University of Notre Dame, where she asked people about abortion. And she asked these long interviews, 90-minute interviews about abortion. And she would ask questions to begin, and then we talk about abortion. She would ask the same questions at the end. The respondents would give different answers to the same questions 90 minutes later than they gave at the beginning.
Wow.
And you would point this out, and they would laugh, and they go, yeah, I get it. Because the thing is, we're always looking for a sensible answer. People think about the world in a black and white way, and guess what? They don't think about the world in black and white. The idea of abortion is murder, very few people actually, they might say it,
yes,
but they actually don't believe it at the core of who they are.
They don't want a mom getting convicted to 25 years to life for having an abortion.
And let's be clear, if you really do believe abortion is murder, the only punishment that makes any sense is the doctor goes to prison for life, the nurse goes to prison for life, the mother goes to prison for life, and your person who drove you to the hospital goes to prison for life, and you're the person who impregnated you goes for prison for life. That is the only punishment that makes sense if you really do believe abortion is murder, because all those people are accessible accessories to murder. And under
They're
our law,
accessories, yeah.
that's a life sentence in prison. The thing is, we say we believe things, but we really don't believe them at the core of who we are. You know, like the idea of like, oh, abortion's good. Now, very few people believe it's actually good. They believe it's necessary in some situations.
Right.
That's the problem, though, is the nutbags on the far left and far right are driving the conversation when most Americans are like, like on immigration. What share of Americans believe we should have completely open borders right now? 5%.
Probably not much.
Yeah, but what share believe we
Yeah.
should completely close the borders? Maybe 10, 15, maybe 20%. But you know what really most Americans think? We should have a sensible immigration policy in this country where we allow people, we make it easier for people to come here legally if they've met certain checkpoints. We make it easier for them to become an American citizen if they've, kind of done the right thing. And if you haven't, then you need to get the heck out. Like, that's where most people are. But guess what? The conversation doesn't happen there. It happens on Somalis are all taking advantage of Americans, or unless we let people come in from other countries, we're committing violence against the rest of the world and settler colonialism and all that nonsense. Like, at some point, the moderate middle has got to stand up and say, you're dumb and you're dumb. Let's find common ground.
That's what I'm trying to say. They're all dumb, right?
They're all dumb.
That's what I've been saying.
I know. But
It's
the
a call
problem
to
is
the radical middle. But then it all disappears, like you said.
Social media does not. I was talking to one of my friends who did a focus group with some mainline Protestants, and they were asking, like, do you protest? And they go, it was this old, sweet old, like, Minnesota Lutheran. She's like, honey, moderates don't march. And it's like, that's the problem right there, man. You know what I mean? Like, the moderates don't stand up and go, you're dumb and you're dumb. Like, let's find a compromise on this issue. And our country's being led by idiots on both the left and the right who are just blowhards who make up nonsense to make us mad.
Yes. I agree. I'm pretty sure I agree with everything you just said.
I mean, here's the thing. Bill Clinton was right on abortion. Safe, legal, and rare. You know why?
Safe, legal, rare.
Safe, legal, rare.
You know what? I actually don't mind that one either.
Nope.
Safe,
guess
legal,
what?
rare.
The average American is right there. Lives right in that spot. Safe, legal, and rare. They don't want to...
I mean, here's the reality. Me and my wife technically had an abortion when we lost our baby. That's what it was written on the medical card.
Yep.
Abortion, termination, pregnancy, or whatever.
Yep.
And we're like, that's awful. And so if that's included in those things, my wife and I, where we tried to preserve the life of our daughter till the end, and then had to, for the sake of my wife, to induce pregnancy.
Yep.
Or induce labor.
Yep.
And so that created a major, like, I remember we saw that on the medical diagnosis or whatever, the paper. I don't know what it's officially called. When I saw that, I was like, oh, I mean, I felt a visceral, like, reaction to that. Like, no, that's not what I did. I didn't abort my daughter.
Yeah.
Like, we faced a choice where we had to make a really horrible, terrible choice between my wife's life and the life of our daughter. And we decided that, and we went as long as we could. We had doctors telling us to abort from the beginning. We actually switched doctors because we were tired of getting told that we should have an abortion. We're like, we get it. We understand. We're not going to do that. Please don't suggest it again. And then they kept doing it, suggesting it. Because, they don't want to have someone dying, have an infection on their hands, right? Because essentially whatever. I won't go into all the details, but they didn't want that to happen, right? So, and I get that. So, but my point in that is that if you look at the reality of the situations, there might be things included in abortion that we wouldn't have a problem with, or we would think, oh yeah, like, I know very, very pro-life people, my parents included, that they were behind and support of our decision because it was saving essentially the life of my wife. So, and it's not quite as simple as that, but it basically is. And so it was, and it had already started too. That was another thing. Like, basically, there was a process that had started where it wasn't going to it had moved past the point where we could go back and safely preserve both lives. And so that was hard. but those things don't get understood within sometimes the broader debate, or they don't get highlighted as much. And it really leads into my question here about like, what are these major issues that you say that they're so major in the cultural issues, and we probably could all say them, but maybe you could go into deeper into them and why they are such a big deal.
Yeah. I mean,
these
right
major issues that push people into being more political than religious, or identifying more politically.
I think abortion,
than religious.
not to like speak too much about abortion, but I think abortion operates on lines that nothing else operates on, because opinion on abortion has actually been fairly stable since Roe, right? For the last, it's actually support for abortion has gone up the last couple of years, but that's actually a reaction to the Dobbs decision, which made abortion illegal in a big part of the country. Abortion is just a visceral thing. Like you show the pictures of the aborted fetuses and the silent scream and all that stuff. Yes. I think it operates in a way that other cultural issues just don't operate on as visceral as abortion does. But I think in the last 10 years, what's really interesting is, so like same-sex marriage was basically anathema in this country in the late 1980s. Like 20% of Americans were in favor of same-sex marriage. And then people don't realize this. In 2004, same-sex marriage was on the ballot. Actually, constitutional amendments that made marriage between one man and one woman were on about like 13 states, and it passed in all 13, including Oregon. Okay, so like we were very anti-gay even 20 years ago. And then 10 years after that, things moved. Like, and we were a majority in favor. It's wild, right? So like, but I think so that the LGBT community won on that. And then the T thing happened. And I think the lesbians and gay people thought the trans movement would just like, we started accepting that really quickly. And in reality, it was like, it took us 40 years to warm up to two guys getting married, and you expect us to be cool with she, they pronouns within 3 years. That's probably not going to happen. And I think actually them hooking their wagon to the T actually hurt the lesbian and gay community support, because they saw them as one group of people, not two groups of people. And in the book, I talk about the trans issue. To me is like this, it's become a litmus test for the left. Like, unless you think that, gender reassignment surgery should be allowed for children, then you hate people for some reason. There's only two groups in America who do not support a ban on gender reassignment for children, and that is atheists and agnostics. Really? Every Christian group, even the liberal mainline, 65% of them are in favor of a ban on conversion therapy for children. So I think that's like the next wave of the culture war, is this trans issue.
Did you mean did you mean a surgery? You said conversion therapy.
No, I mean
did you
treatment.
Mean a surgery?
Anything hormones or surgery or anything treating a child with gender issues. I can't think of the name of the question right now, but it's like, it's more about just any not just surgery, any treatment.
Sure. Yeah. Gender affirming care. Is that
gender affirming care? That's what it was.
Yeah. Yeah. We've had some people on to talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's just an issue that like the public is not ready for. Like, I think we just need to be very clear. Now, does that mean, I don't know about right or wrong. I'm just telling you what public opinion says. And even among young people, like they're on the fence about this issue. Like 25-year-olds are like 50-50 on this issue, which is like, I think we should pump our brakes. And the problem is the Democratic Party hooks its wagon to these honestly fringe social issues like that. It's a fringe issue by definition. If the right is wrong for hooking its wagon to abolition on abortion, the left is wrong for hooking its wagon to, we should allow 12-year-olds to get hormone replacement therapy so they don't go through puberty. Like, those are nonsensical positions on both sides.
I agree with you. Like, I definitely agree with what you're saying.
It's just hard to just to say reasonable things. You know what I'm saying? Like, if an adult wants to remove his penis and turn it into a vagina, okay.
By all means.
I'm not going to stop you. You're a consenting adult, and whatever. A 13-year-old who wants to take hormone replacement therapy, that's a different conversation. I think we need to recognize the difference, the qualitative difference between those two conversations. And yet we can't in modern discourse. They get kind of lumped together into one thing. Like, unless you let this, and this is, listen, the trans movement in some ways is just as caustic as the abolitionist movement, because these kids will go on the microphone and say, would you rather have a trans kid or a dead kid? Like
Yeah.
that is not helpful rhetoric. Okay. Because what you're saying is, unless you allow me to do this thing, I'm going to kill myself. You're basically holding a gun to my head at that situation. And I can't make a rational decision. Like,
Yeah.
The whole debate has lost its way. It's just lost its way. And I think we need to say sensible things. Like I'm just tired of people not being able to say sensible things without being canceled.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good.
Come on, Will. I know you got thoughts on this. Don't pretend you don't.
No, I mean, I agree. I think that we should have better and more sensible conversations about things that are affecting Americans. I mean, I think that the cure would be if we just appreciated that there's nuance in every single situation. We'd be much better. I mean, like I know I've said this.
I agree.
You know, that like with the trans and the hormone therapy for kids, I'm not smart enough to really have an opinion on it. But what I do know is that, like, when my 11-year-old was going through chemo for his brain tumor, doctors had talked about hormone therapy because you've got a kid on chemo, you know, like, and I'm like, I don't want my kid to not be able to have access to hormone therapy because, like, you know, he's going to lose all of his hair at like 11 years old, you know, like,
right.
So, but like in the broader debate, it's like no hormones for kids. And I'm sitting there like, oh, wait a minute, you know, like there are going to be kids that are going to be affected by this, you know, that like my own son. And I'm just like, who are the people that are speaking up and advocating for these people? And but we don't need to go down the trans rabbit hole because that's not where we brought you on. But
wait a minute. I thought that was the whole conversation.
Well, dude, everyone loves the trans rabbit hole.
Oh gosh, I the conversation is not even worth it at this point because someone's going to get mad at you about some nonsense. You know what I mean?
I've already said things that are going to piss everybody off. I think on this episode.
But that's the problem is we got to have courage to stand up and say sensible things. Like just say the sensible thing. Because you know what's going to happen when you say the sensible thing? People in the audience are going to go, yeah.
Some people are, absolutely.
Like, Now you're
not going to hear from the people that agree. By the way. You're just going to hear from the people that are haters. The people that agree, they're not going to say anything. They think you're all, hey, you're good.
Yeah, like, why do you hate me? It's like, no, I don't hate you. Like, again, like, Josh, were you an accessory to an abortion? No. Like, let's be clear about that.
Yeah, I mean, but I hear you.
Like, is Will's kid going through hormone replacement therapy to change their gender? No. Like, let's be real about this. Let's have a real conversation about the nuances of the differences between those two situations because they're not the same. I mean,
absolutely.
That's what's frustrating.
Yeah, nuance is definitely needed in these times. And speaking of nuance, like I want to understand the nuance of this book and how it fits into the broader scale of your other work. So I'm just going to read a couple of the other books you've written. So you've written The Nuns, where they came from, who they are and where they are going. You wrote The Great Dechurching, who's leaving, why are they going, and what will it take to bring them back? And I'm curious, like the Vanishing Church. Yeah. So like, how does this fit among the greater pantheon of works that you've already done?
I think in many ways, this is the sort of natural evolution of what I've been up to, which is like, I always call this my big swing book, like a grand theory of things book. The other books are sort of more like descriptive, you know, just like, here's what's happening in the world. And let me try to explain it with some nuance and some clarity and some cool graphs and, you know, kind of insights that way. I've always been really intrigued by sort of the grand theory of everything books, which are hard. Because here's the value of them. Even if they're wrong, they start conversations. I think there's a lot of value in the conversation. So for me, that's what this book was for me, is it was a book written to people like me who want to be part of a Christian community, but have never really felt like they were at home in the liberal mainline church or the super conservative evangelical church either. Like, I always wanted to seek out the most conservative mainline church, the most liberal evangelical church, and find my home in a place like that. And unfortunately, people like me, they don't seek that out anymore. They seek out their couch on Sunday morning, right? They're not going. And so I think a lot of what the book is being written to is people who are in my position, who it was easy to not make the decision and stay home. But like that's not what you're called to do, not just from a spiritual standpoint, but also a social standpoint. Like, I think in some ways, like the purpose of the book, and this is the part, like how, you know, the hollowing out of moderate congregational church democracy. Like that, we led with that because this is an argument, a big argument about how religion plays a central role in a functioning democracy. And it's failing in that role because it's become so polarized and homogenized, especially in the white community around conservatism. So I think in some ways it's sort of the natural extension of the other stuff. It's like, okay, so what's the implications of this changing religious landscape? And the implications are a country that is lonelier, that is angrier, that's more disconnected, that's more polarized, that's harder to govern, and more miserable, to be honest with you, and more miserable. I really think that's true.
So give us some hope in the sense in your chapter, Not All is Lost.
Yeah.
You kind of lay out a vision.
Yeah.
So we're in an age of neighborhoods that are sorted. We got feeds, we got algorithms, we got echo chambers, we got congregations, and we're going to that one because they mentioned Charlie Kirk, and we're going to that one because they didn't mention Charlie Kirk.
Mm-hmm.
Or what do we do here? It seems like it's a big cluster. How do we you can fill in the next part. How do we work through this? Why isn't everything lost? Give us some hope.
So first of all, I'll say anyone who says, if your pastor didn't talk about Charlie Kirk, find a new church, you need to go away now. Thank you. Like, that's nonsense. Like, it literally is nonsense. Like, you're telling me you know more about my church than I know?
Mm-hmm.
Kiss my butt, dude. You don't know anything. Like you
Language.
Really don't. I know. I could have said more words right there than I would.
Hey, drop it. Then we can put in an explicit one on this.
Ooh, for subscribers only.
Yes.
But it's true though. Like, you don't know my congregation, and whether it's Barack Obama gets assassinated, God forbid, or Charlie Kirk, I don't have to bring anything up in church I don't think will feed my community and be a good shepherd to my people. Period. Like, you don't tell me how to run my church. I don't tell you how to run your stupid social media account. Okay. Like, stay in your lane, homie. So let me just be exceedingly clear on that. Like, I have no patience in my life anymore for other people to tell me how to do my job, because I don't tell you how to do your job. Okay. So not all hope is lost though. I mean, I think here's the thing. There are millions of Americans who are sitting at home on Sunday morning who could easily change their entire lives by just getting off their couch and going to a local congregation and endeavoring to be part of the community. Like, yes, being there, just being part of it. And guess what? You don't have to believe in any of it or most of it to show up. As a pastor, I never cared what my people believed. If they didn't believe any of it, I'm just happy as can be that they showed up on Sunday morning. I'm just glad. I'm glad you're
part
here.
Of the community. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
You're just part of us. And guess what? Sometimes I didn't feel like going either, but I showed up. There's a lot of value in just being part of a community. And I think if you show up, listen, I'm not asking you to write a check for $1,000. I'm not asking you to go across the world. I'm not asking you to stop stupid habits that you're involved. You know what I'm asking you to do? Take 1 hour of your week and go to a house of worship. That's all I'm asking. And many people could do that tomorrow. They have many churches right down the road from them. And by the way, if you go to a church that you don't love, actually you hate, go to a new one. Just pick a new one. It's fine. It'll be fine. I promise.
You'll be all right.
You'll be all right. You'll be all right. But here's the thing, and I also mentioned this in this chapter, that last chapter. The perfect is the enemy of the good. You don't have to find a perfect church where you agree with every piece of theology. You might disagree with him on abortion or trans or gay or women ordination. That's fine. It's okay to disagree. But you don't need to run away from a place where you don't agree with everything. You actually need to disagree with some things to stay there. And guess what? It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay to be in a place where people will sit next to you who vote for someone you hate. It's okay to be in a community of people who don't all think like you and believe like you and vote like you. It actually is good for you to be in a place like that.
Yeah.
Find yourself in that community. That's all I'm asking. I'm not asking for the world. I'm asking you just to show up and be human for 1 hour a week. And I think what you're going to see very quickly is within a couple of months, you're going to enjoy being there. You're going to enjoy the community you've created. And a byproduct of that is democracy is going to be better because of your involvement in your local community. Like John F. Kennedy said, ask not what you can do ask not what the country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. The answer is really simple. Show up once a week for an hour. That's
That's
it.
interesting.
That's all you need to do. And for most people in this audience who hear this, that will move the needle for them in a demonstrable way in a fairly short period of time. Whether they like it or not, you got to take your medicine. All right? You got to take
Eat
your
your
medicine.
veggies.
Yeah, you got to eat your veggies. And by the way, the people that irritate me the most in this world, like, oh, I'm miserable and I'm lonely and I'm depressed. And I'm like, why don't you like go to church? Oh, that's not it. That won't do it. What's your alternative? That's the kind of stuff I have no patience for either, is people who are just miserable and love to wallow in their misery. And when you give them tangible ways to dig out of the hole that they're in, throw the shovel back at you and say, nope, that's not the way. I mean, come on. Like at some point, you've got to help yourself here a little bit. And going to a house of worship this Sunday is a great place to start.
I love that. Well, I just appreciate so much your work, Ryan. The books that you have. How can people get involved in your work, follow you? Is there a preferred vendor for the book, Vanishing Church, and all of your others? Just kind of sell yourself right now. This is the opportunity.
So you can find me on Substack, Graphs About Religion. That I write Mondays and Thursdays about that.
Nice.
So make sure you follow me on there if you like what I'm up to. The Vanishing Church, like I said, I don't even care where you buy it from. I think I get the same royalty rate no matter where it comes from. So for me, Amazon's easy. Go buy it on Amazon. Baker Books did have a pre-order sale that was 40% off and free shipping, which got down to $16. That's a good deal.
Nice.
The ebook is going to come out, and there's going to be an audio book that's coming out too. I'm not reading the book, thank God, because that sounds awful. You can find me drburge.com, and on Twitter, I'm at Ryan Burge, where I just tweet graphs and get in fights sometimes.
That's awesome. Well, man, thank you so much for coming on the program, spending some time with us. It's really cool.
Been a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. To our viewers and our listeners, guys, thanks for joining us. Make sure you like and subscribing. Also, we have a Patreon. So head over to the patreon.com website, look up Faithful Politics. Join us there. We're going to be giving you behind the scenes looks, early access to things, and trying to really create a hub where we can get more critical thinking about this world, about the culture, about things going on. So make sure that you go check that out. You can sign up for free. There are paid options as well. And guys, until next time, keep your conversations not right or left, but up, and we'll see you soon.